The knock came low, like someone ashamed to ask. She opened the door and saw her, barefoot, hair stuck to her cheeks, thin as wire, eyes too calm for how cold it was. "I ain't got enough to feed two," the widow said. The girl didn't blink, just stepped inside, dripping onto the floorboards. "You hear me?" Nothing. The widow locked the door behind her, lit the lamp. The girl stood in the center of the room, water pooling around her. "You run from someone." Silence. "You got a name?" Still nothing. She pulled out the chair near the stove. "Sit." The girl moved slowly, sat without a sound. Her dress clung to her legs like wet paper. The widow fetched a towel, dropped it in the girl's lap. "Dry off." She didn't. Just stared across the room, straight at the wall. The frame. The widow followed her gaze. It was the boy's photo, taken before the flood, before he walked out and never came back. Wide grin, shirt half buttoned. That was the last day she'd seen him. "You know him?" No answer. "I said—" The girl's lips parted, but no words. "Are you hungry or not?" Still nothing. But her hands twitched when the widow walked toward the pantry. She set down a plate, 2 biscuits, leftover beans, 1 spoon. "Eat." The girl didn't touch it. "Suit yourself." The widow sat across from her, watched. The lamp hissed once and steadied. The only sound after that was the ticking clock above the door and the slow drip of the girl's clothes onto the rug. "You mute." Pause. "Deaf?" A blink. "So you can hear." No nod, no shake, but her gaze never left the photo. "Have you seen him?" The girl's fingers tightened on the edge of the chair. "You recognize that face?" The girl shifted. I looked at the widow now, then back at the frame. "I asked you something." Nothing again. The widow stood. I walked toward the shelf, took the photo down, set it on the table between them, slid it closer to the girl. "That's my son." The girl stared at it. One finger lifted, touched the glass, traced the edge of his face like it meant something. "Tell me," the widow said. "Do you know where he is?" Still silent. "Dead?" No reaction. "Taken?" Nothing. The widow's voice broke now. "Or did he run?" "You know that?" The girl looked down. "I don't care if it's bad. I just want to know." No answer came. The widow slammed her hand on the table. The plate jumped. "Say something." The girl blinked. Then she reached out and pushed the photo an inch back toward the widow. Her hand trembled. Her lips moved, but she still didn't speak. The widow sat down again, breathing hard. She picked up the photo, held it against her chest, rocked once in her seat. "Are you cold?" The girl nodded. The widow grabbed a dry quilt from the cot and tossed it around her shoulders. The girl didn't thank her, didn't flinch. She pulled it tight and curled into the chair like she belonged there. The widow stood by the stove, staring at the iron pot. Too old to cry, too tired to yell. "You got someone looking for you." The girl shook her head. "You run from home?" Stillness. "Someone hurt you?" Nothing. "Are you going to keep this up all night?" The girls stared at the window now, the glass fogged from their breath. The widow sat down again. "You don't get to come into a woman's house, stare at her boy's face, and keep your mouth shut." The girl's eyes narrowed. "You got a tongue. Use it." Still nothing. The widow stood, paced once. I looked at the closed door. The rain still hadn't stopped. She thought about throwing the girl back into it. Instead, she said, "You sleep by the stove." The girl didn't move. "You hear me?" The girl stood, crossed the room in 2 slow steps, curled up on the braided rug like a dog. The quilt barely covered her. The widow blew out the lamp. The dark returned like it had been waiting. She lay on the cot, staring at the ceiling. The rocking chair creaked once. No wind, no movement. In the dark, she whispered, "You dream girl." No answer. She waited, breath shallow. Then, soft, barely there. "I see him." The widow froze. "What?" The girl's voice was thinner than rain. "In the dark." The widow sat up. "What did you say?" The girl turned her face toward the fire's dying glow. "I know where he sleeps." The widow stood, heart in her throat. "What do you mean?" Silence. "Where?" The girl closed her eyes. "Where, damn it?" The only sound was the creak of the rocker. Back and forth. Back and forth. Like something left unfinished. Like a memory refusing to rest. The plate hit the floor before the words even finished leaving her mouth. I know where he sleeps. The crack of ceramic against wood rang through the kitchen. The beans smeared out in a slow, wet circle across the planks. The widow didn't move. What did you just say? The girl sat still, legs pulled under the quilt, hands tucked tight beneath her arms. You say that again. The girl blinked slow. Say it. I know where he sleeps. The widow stepped forward. Her boot crushed the edge of the broken plate. You don't joke like that. I'm not. You don't come into my house, look at my boy's face, and say things you don't mean. I didn't lie. The widow's breath caught like it had somewhere to go, but couldn't. Her hands curled into fists at her sides. Who told you? The girl didn't answer. I said. She did. Who? The girl pointed. A small bone-thin finger aimed steady at the rocking chair in the corner. The chair rocked once. The widow's voice cracked. Ain't nobody there. She sits there. No, she doesn't. She watches you sleep. The widow moved so fast the girl flinched. She snatched the chair by its slats and dragged it across the room. Nothing's in it, she snapped. See? The chair stilled. No sound now, just a heavy breath, and the storm outside trying to remember how to end. The girl didn't blink. She only comes when it's quiet. The widow gripped the back of the chair tighter. Who is she? She held his hand. Told him not to cry. The words twisted in the widow's gut. How would you know that? The girl shrugged. I saw it. When? Before the water came. The widow turned. You were there? The girl looked down. I was underneath. Under what? The girl didn't answer. She curled tighter into herself. The widow walked back toward the stove. Her boots left wet prints where the beans had spilled. She opened the door, shoved a log in, slammed it shut. You better not be playing me. I'm not. You better not be one of those that likes attention. I don't. She turned around. You have a family? No. Someone must be looking. No one. The fire popped. Send a spark against the grate. You run from something? The girl shrugged again. The widow leaned back against the counter. If you know where he is, you'll take me. I will. When? When she tells me again. The widow grabbed the broken pieces of the plate one by one, set them on the table like bones. What does she say to you? She sings. What song? I don't know. The widow stared down at the mess, the way it spread out, like the floor was bleeding. What's your name? I don't have one. Everyone's got a name. They took it. Who? The girl pointed at the chair again. No. Who took it? She didn't answer. The widow wiped her hands on her skirt, sat across from her. You got a mark? The girl looked confused. A scar. A number. A brand. Anything? The girl pulled the quilt off her shoulder, turned her arm. There, near the bone, was a line of stitched letters. Not ink, not carved, sewn, like embroidery done by a hand that hated softness. G-3-R. The widow reached forward before she knew what she was doing, touched it with her thumb. It's thread, she whispered. The girl nodded. It itched for weeks. The widow pulled back. What does it mean? I was the third. Third of what? The ones she watched. The widow sat very still. And the first. She sleeps. The second? She's missing. The widow whispered, and my boy. The girl looked at the fire. He's not missing. He's waiting. The wind hit the side of the house then, like something large had brushed against it. The girl said softly, She says he didn't scream. The widow gripped the edge of the table. What else did she say? She waited. With him. After what? She said the water wasn't an accident. The widow stood again. No, don't you say that? That flood took half the valley. Wasn't nobody's fault. She said someone let it loose. The room went silent. The girl pulled the quilt back around her shoulders. The widow walked to the cabinet, opened the top drawer, took out the folded newspaper, yellowed, damp in the corners. She slapped it on the table. This is a natural disaster. The girl looked at it. Then why was the bridge sealed before it hit? The widow didn't answer. The girl leaned forward now, voice barely there. She said they needed it gone. All of it. The widow's lips barely moved. She's lying. She doesn't lie. The fire popped again. The girl looked at the photo still resting beside the broken plate. She says he's under the orchard. The widow looked up fast. What? She says the roots never took. The widow's hands shook as she picked up the paper. She says if you dig, you'll find the ones that didn't scream. Then the girl leaned back into the quilt, eyes heavy, and the chair rocked once more, slow, gentle, like a lullaby only some could hear. The creaking started just after the fire dropped low, slow, measured, back and forth, like it had a rhythm, like it remembered how. The widow sat up straight in bed, heart already thudding before her feet hit the floor. She hadn't lit the lamp. I didn't need to. The chair rocked in the dark. She could feel it, even without seeing. She stepped quiet into the room. The girl still lay curled by the stove, quilt bunched at her side, eyes open. You hear that? The girl nodded. No windows open. No wind either. The widow stared at the rocker. You move it? No. Get up. The girl stood. The widow stepped toward the chair. It rocked slower now. Creak, creak, creak. She held out her hand, stilled it with her palm, waited. It stayed still. She backed up. Then it started again. Creak, creak. The widow turned sharp. Get your hands off it. I didn't touch it. Are you doing something? No. The widow moved to the rack near the back door, pulled down the rifle. Cold wood, familiar weight. You believe in spirits, girl? I believe in what watches. What's watching now? The girl didn't blink. Not her. The widow checked the barrel, loaded, clean. Have you ever seen a man die? Yes. Have you ever pulled a trigger? The girl shook her head. The widow raised the rifle, pointed it straight at the chair. Then listen. She fired once. The sound cracked through the cabin and out into the woods. Smoke drifted from the barrel. The chair didn't stop. It kept rocking. The girl didn't flinch. The widow lowered the rifle, chest heaving, ears ringing. What in hell? She says he's... Under the orchard, the widow turned. Who says that? The girl stepped toward the chair, placed her hand on the armrest. She said it just now. The widow felt her knees weaken. Your ears still work, right? Yes. Then you heard that shot? Yes. And you're not scared. The girl looked at the chair. She's not angry. She just wants you to remember. Remember what? That he didn't die in the flood. The widow's voice broke. I buried a box. You buried a box of clothes. I saw his boots. You saw what they gave you. The widow backed up, hit the edge of the table. The girl turned. He didn't float away. He didn't drown. How would you know? Because I saw the map. What map? The one she showed me. The one under the bed. There's nothing under that bed. There is now. The widow moved fast, kicked aside the cot, dropped to her knees. Her hand reached under, touched paper. She pulled out a folded map, water-stained, smelled like mildew and fire. She opened it. The property, the orchard, a red X drawn behind the third row. She looked up. What is this? She made him draw it. Who? The nurse. The widow stood. The chair rocked harder now, louder, like it was laughing. She marked all of you, the girl said. I never... She stitched you quietly, then fed you the lie. The widow gripped the map tight. That orchard's dead. Nothing grows. She said the ground remembers what it covers. The widow moved to the window, looked out. Moonlight spilled crooked across the trees. I don't want to dig. She said you have to. The widow glanced at the girl. And if I don't? She said you'll never sleep again. The widow didn't answer. The rocker creaked again. Creak, creak, creak. The widow walked to the door, pulled on her coat, took the rifle. You're not coming. I know. She stepped outside. The cold hit fast, grass slick under her boots. She walked toward the trees, moonlighting her only guide. The orchard waited like it had been expecting her. Row after row of twisted trunks. No leaves, no birds, no sound. She reached the third row, counted 4 trees down. The ground was softer there, a dip in the soil, not fresh, but not settled either. She set the rifle against a stump, dropped to her knees, started digging with her hands. The dirt clung to her nails. Her breath fogged out in bursts. 10 minutes passed, then 20. Then her fingers hit something hard. She scraped. It wasn't wood. It was bone. She froze. Her breath stopped. The rocker creaked again. She heard it. Out here. As if it had followed her. She clawed more, unearthed a boot, small, familiar. A buckle snapped clean off. Her body folded forward. She didn't cry. She just sat still. The wind picked up once, just enough to move the branches like fingers. Behind her, the girl's voice, quiet, barely above a whisper. "I told you he didn't drown." The widow didn't turn. "He was put here." The girl stepped forward, placed something beside the hole, a single glove, tiny, blue, the mate to the one she kept in the drawer. The widow whispered, "Why you?" "Because I remember." The widow reached for the glove. "Hold it like it could burn." "What was his name?" the girl asked. The widow swallowed. "Caleb." The girl nodded. "She said he waited." The widow didn't speak. The girl turned and walked back toward the house. The rocker creaked, then stopped. The sky hadn't lightened yet, but the widow was already back in the orchard, hands raw, nails black. The girl walked behind her, arms wrapped tight around her ribs, the same quilt dragging through the grass. They didn't speak. The hole from last night sat open like a wound. The boot is still half buried, the glove now folded in the widow's coat pocket. She dropped to her knees again, dug with a flat garden spade she'd found in the shed. "Help me," she muttered. The girl knelt, took the other side. The soil turned easy, too easy, like something had kept it loose, like the ground refused to hold what had been forced into it. "You smell that?" the widow asked. "Like iron, like lies." The girl said nothing. They hit cloth next, not bone. A canvas sheet, worn and soaked. The widow tugged, and part of it lifted with a wet snap. Underneath, something metallic, round, dull gold. The widow brushed the dirt away. A sheriff's badge. She stopped breathing. The girl leaned in. "Is that his?" The widow shook her head. "No." "You sure?" "He lost his the year before the flood. Got a new one. Square edge. This one's rounded. Too clean." She picked it up. I turned it in her hand. "No initials on the back. They never meant for it to be found." The widow sat back on her heels. Mud soaked into her skirt. "Keep digging," she said. The girl cleared another patch of dirt, more clothes, a belt, pieces of bone, smaller than the first. The widow reached in, brushed off what looked like part of a collar. Her fingers trembled. "Caleb never wore uniform shirts like this." "Then who is it?" the widow whispered. "That's what I'm about to find out." She sat back again. The girl kept digging, slower now. "You bury more than one boy out here?" the girl asked. "I never buried anyone." "You sure?" "Are you accusing me?" "No, just asking if you remember it all." The widow didn't answer. The girl leaned down, brushed away another layer of dirt. Her hand stopped. She pulled something out slowly. A tooth. She held it out. "Ma'am." The widow didn't take it. The girl dropped it onto the canvas. "You think I'm cursed?" she asked. The widow blinked. "What?" "The others thought I was. Before the rain came, you were in that place, weren't you?" "Wherever they kept him," the girl nodded. "How'd you get out?" "She told me to run." "Her again?" "She said, 'Wake up now. Your name's not hers.' So I ran." The widow swallowed hard. "And Caleb?" "She said he stayed quiet so I could leave." The widow stared at the badge in her palm. "This ain't my boy." "No, but he knew yours." "You say that like it matters." "It does." The wind moved through the orchard, rattling dry branches. Nothing bloomed. Nothing ever had. "Why didn't you tell the law?" the widow asked. "They were part of it." "Not all of them." "Enough." The widow stood, wiped her hands on her skirt. "This badge belonged to someone they erased." "Like Caleb." "No," she said, looking at the pit. "Caleb's not erased. He's buried." "You think that's better?" The widow didn't answer. She walked toward the tree line, back stiff. The girl stayed by the hole, staring down. "You had another boy," the girl said. The widow stopped. "You buried him differently." "Maybe younger. Maybe before Caleb." The widow turned. "I had one son." "No, you had one left." The words struck harder than the cold. "You lie." The girl shrugged. "Maybe. But she says he remembers too." The widow took one step forward. "You don't get to come here, dig up bones, and rewrite my life." "I'm not rewriting it. Just reading what's buried." The widow's voice cracked. "I would remember." "You don't want to." Silence. Then the girl stood. I walked over to the tree nearest the grave. Her hand touched the bark. "This one split through. It got hit by lightning last fall." "No," she said. "It split when something screamed under it." The widow looked down at the badge in her hand. You're not right. No, ma'am. I'm not. She sat at the base of the tree, dirt still under her nails, eyes far off. The widow dropped the badge in her coat. I'm taking this to someone. They won't listen. They'll listen to me. You were the sheriff's wife. You're not anymore. I'm still his widow. The girl looked up. Then you should know where his papers are, the ones he wasn't supposed to keep. The widow froze. What papers? He kept names. Letters, promises. Some are broken, some paid off. The widow stepped closer. Where? The girl looked toward the house, behind the old stove. The wall panel that sounds hollow when you knock. How would you? He told me. Before he gave me your son's glove. The wind howled once, sudden and sharp. The girl stood. There's more than one grave out here, but yours. It's the only one that'll speak. The widow turned back to the hole. I looked at the second set of bones, then at the orchard, and for a moment she thought she heard something under the ground, something whispering, or maybe breathing. The widow knelt again at the edge of the pit. The light had turned gray, not quite morning, not quite done with night. The dirt was wet against her knees, sticky as blood. She reached for the bones slowly, as if touching them would make them speak. They didn't. Too small, she muttered. The girl stood quiet beside her, arms crossed under the quilt. Too small for a man. The widow brushed away more earth. A rib cage, fragile, a bent wrist bone. One knee turned sideways like it hadn't healed right. No shoes, just soft, crumbling scraps of cloth around the ankles. She moved to the collar. It was still there, barely. The shirt had rotted through, but the buttons held. 4 of them, tiny, metal shaped like moons. She blinked. Her voice cracked. These? The girl said nothing. The widow held one button between her thumb and forefinger. It shone faintly in the pale light. I've seen this before, she whispered. I've seen these. The girl stepped forward, slow. The widow turned. Where? The girl didn't answer. The widow stood, face pale. You said she stitched you. The girl nodded. What kind of thread? Blue, thicker than it should have been. Buttons? The girl lifted her sleeve. Same 4 moons, same pattern, same size. The widow's hands dropped to her sides. She made 2 the same, the girl said. 1 for me, 1 for him. The widow shook her head. I never had another. You did. I'd remember. No. You'd bury it. The widow backed up from the grave like it could rise and accuse her. I'd know if I held to. She said you screamed when the second came. Don't. She said he was quiet. He never cried. Stop talking. You named him, but never said it out loud. I said stop. The girl didn't move. You told her to take him. Said you couldn't do it twice. The widow stared hard. What do you mean, do it? Raise one in a place like this? The wind stirred the orchard again. The trees didn't move right. They tilted inward. The widow walked to the far tree, placed her palm flat against the trunk. I would have told someone. You did, the girl said. She just wasn't someone who'd help. The widow's eyes filled with something like panic. This is a trick. The girl shook her head. The widow turned back. You're trying to make me think I had another. That I forgot. That I buried him. You didn't bury him. Then who did? The girl looked at the grave. She did. Who is she? The widow snapped. You keep telling her like I should know. She's the one who stitched the silence in your mouth. The widow stared at her. I won't play. Crazy. She's not in your head. She's under your house. The widow stepped forward. You want me to believe I had 2 sons. You did. That I gave one away. You gave him to the state. The widow's voice broke again. The papers said stillborn. They lied. The widow turned her back. I walked fast toward the trees, her hand on her chest. I would have named him, she whispered. I would have done that much. You did. The girl followed slowly. You named him after your father, then never spoke it again. The widow turned. What name? I don't know, the girl said. She never told me that part. The widow's mouth trembled. I want proof. You're standing over it. I want papers. They're behind the stove. I want to see my name next to his. You won't. Why? Because they made him theirs the second you signed. The wind died down. The orchard turned quiet. The widow stared back into the grave. The bones didn't accuse. They just waited. I'm going to find what's behind the stove. Good, the girl said. If this is real, it is. The widow didn't move. Say the name, the girl whispered. The widow blinked. What? Say it. If you remember, I don't. Try. The widow stepped forward, staring down into the pit. She swallowed. Her lips moved once, then again. She said it softly. Micah. The girl looked up. The widow's voice cracked open. Micah. The trees stirred again. The girl knelt by the grave. You said it. I think I always knew. The girl touched the edge of the canvas. She said he waited for you. But you never came. The widow's eyes blurred. I didn't know. She said he stopped asking. I was told. She said he forgave you. The widow fell to her knees. I didn't know. You buried the memory, not the boy. The wind picked up just enough to move a loose strand of hair from the girl's cheek. The widow leaned forward, picked up the shirt collar again. Moon buttons. She pressed it to her chest and held it there. The girl stood in front of the hearth, hand pressed to the brick. The fire had long gone out, but the stone still held a trace of heat. She tapped her knuckles along the lower edge, slow, careful, listening. Hollow. Again. Hollow. She crouched down and traced the mortar with her fingernail. Then she looked back. She said they're behind here. The widow didn't move from the table. Her hands were wrapped around the cold coffee mug she hadn't touched in hours. You said they burned, the girl said. I saw the flames. The widow murmured. They weren't all in the fire. The girl found a loose brick, dug her fingers into the gap and pulled. It scraped free with a soft groan. Dust swirled out. Behind it, the dark mouth of a cavity, deep, waiting. She reached in, pulled out a rusted tin. The widow looked up. It was round, about the size of a lunch tin, faded green paint, edges flaked to metal. The girl set it on the floor and opened it with both thumbs. Inside, letters, folded tight, dozens. The girl picked one up, unfolded it slowly. No name, she said. Who are they? The widow asked. The girl turned the paper toward her. Mama. That's all it says. The widow's voice shook. That's not me. The girl held up another. I'm in the third row now. They moved me after I asked about the door. Another one. We don't say names. Names get you taken to the gate. The widow stood now, crossed the room with heavy steps. She dropped to her knees beside the girl. The girl handed her a letter. The handwriting was small, pressed. A child's maybe, or someone forced to write small. They feed us sugar before we go to sleep. That's how you know it's your turn. The widow closed her eyes. I never saw this. She said your husband did. The widow opened another. I missed the blue chair, the real one, not the one they made me draw. They said if I get the shape wrong again, I'll stay in the dark longer. The girl watched her. Quiet. The widow read on. These are children. The girl nodded. Some younger than me. The widow looked up. Where was this? She said underneath. Under what? The building with no foundation. The widow's hands trembled. What building? The girl pointed to the back window. The old clinic. No one goes there anymore. She said no one went there even when it was open. The widow opened another letter. The paper cracked along the fold. I saw the tunnel again. I think it loops back. There's no sky when I run. Just pipes. She dropped it, picked up another. Mama, if you're real, please remember me. My fingers are turning in when I sleep. She dropped that one too. Her hand clutched the floor like it might keep her from falling inward. The girl leaned forward, pulled one last letter from the bottom. Different paper, thick, unfolded slowly. The ink was darker, letters sharper. They changed my name again. I'm back to A5. The sugar tasted wrong this time. She said I'd wake up differently. Tell Caleb I saw the well. It's not dry. The widow's breath caught. What? The girl asked. She held out her hand. Give me that. The girl passed it over. The widow read it again. Tell Caleb I saw the well. It's not dry. Her voice cracked open. He was there. The girl nodded. They knew each other. The widow pressed her hand to her mouth. The girl lifted another letter. Sometimes she reads them out loud. The ones she keeps. She says names slow, like tasting them. The widow whispered, This isn't a clinic, no. It never was. I used to go there for checkups, blood pressure, They said I had iron deficiency. They took it from you." The widow's eyes widened. "The blood?" The girl nodded. "And more." The widow looked at the tin. "How'd it end up here?" She said your husband knew. That he couldn't burn them. He hated fire. He feared what it'd leave behind. The widow touched the letters like they were bones. She said he used to read them. After you'd sleep, he never told me. He didn't need to. You were grieving. The widow laughed once dry. He made me think grief was silence. He was trying to protect you. From the truth, from the others. The widow looked down. He never visited the orchard after Caleb died. He did. At night, you saw him? No, she did. The widow looked at the tin again. She kept them, the girl said. All of them. I want to see the place, the widow said. The real place. The tunnels. The rooms. You can't go alone. Then come with me. The girl nodded. The widow stood slowly. Hold the tin in both hands like it might shatter. Lock the door behind us. The girl grabbed the key. And bring the lamp. I don't want to see this place in the dark. As they stepped outside, the wind picked up. Behind them, the rocker creaked once, then stopped. The moment they stepped back inside, the widow veered toward the pantry like something had grabbed her spine and turned it. She moved fast, silent. The girl followed, slower. The cupboard creaked open. Top shelf, the widow said, breathing short. Behind the oats. The girl didn't ask why. She stepped forward, reached high, pulled down the old sugar tin, dented lid, red label faded to rust. The widow grabbed it. She didn't set it on the table. She didn't sit. She pried the lid off right there, with fingers shaking. The sugar inside was stiff, lumpy, damp at the edges. She dug in. The spoon clanked against something hard. The girl didn't flinch. The widow dropped the spoon, reached in with her hand, pulled out something small, white. She held it up to the light. A tooth, not an adult. Round, smooth. Baby-sized, she whispered. She dropped it on the table like it burned her. The girl said quietly, "They brought him here." The widow stared at her. "Who?" "Your son." "The others." They were moved, one at a time. Here, the girl nodded. "Not the house, the land. The place where things don't grow." The widow backed up from the tin. "Why would someone put this here?" "To remind you." "Of what?" "That forgetting doesn't save anyone." The widow's hands clenched. "You said I never knew. Now you say I forgot. Which is it? You weren't told, but part of you knew." The widow slammed the tin down hard. Sugar jumped. The tooth rolled, tapped against the tin's edge. "I was told he drowned, that they couldn't find the body, that it was too fast, that the current—" "They lied." Her voice cracked. "Everyone lied." The girl didn't respond. The widow stared at the tin. "I used that sugar." The girl stepped closer. "We all did." The widow's breath caught. What was in it? Something sweet. Something that made it easier. Easier to what? To forget. The widow gripped the edge of the counter. "You're saying I gave it to him?" "No, you gave it to yourself." She turned slowly, eyes wide. "Why would I do that?" "Because they said it would help. They told you sleep was better than grief." The widow moved to the sink, turned on the tap, let it run. Then she lifted the tin. Undo it. Sugar hit the metal basin in soft clumps. Then the tooth. Then nothing. She ran the water hard, watched the sugar dissolve, clump, and vanish. The tooth stayed. She picked it up with a rag and dropped it into the stove's ash pan. "Burn it," she said. "It won't burn," the girl answered. The widow turned. "Why not?" "Because it's already been through fire." They stood there, facing each other. The kettle hissed behind them. The rocker creaked once. The widow's face went blank. She turned her head slowly. The chair rocked again. Creak, creak. "Don't," she said. The girl didn't move. The widow walked over, still holding the rag in her hand. She gripped the rocker's arm. I tried to stop it. It kept moving. She sat in it, and it stopped. She didn't rock. She didn't speak. She just sat. The girl stood still, hands folded. The widow whispered, "I gave them my name. I signed what he told me. I thought it was for the insurance. The burial plot, it was consent. I didn't know what I was signing. They counted on that." She looked up. "He never forgave me. That's why he stayed silent." "No, he stayed silent because they made him, I don't know what's worse." The girl walked over, sat on the floor by the stove. The widow still didn't move. I used to sit here, she said, after Caleb left. I'd rock till morning, tell myself I heard his steps coming up the path. The girl said nothing. I used to think grief was an ache, a sharp one, but it's not. What is it? It's quiet. It waits. It settles in the chair and rocks with you. The chair creaked again. Just once. She blinked. I need to see that place. The one you said's under the clinic. You sure? I've seen bones. Letters. A tooth. That should be enough. But it's not. The girl stood. We'll go at night. Why? Because it only opens when the sun drops. That's when they moved us. The widow looked out of the window. The orchard swayed faintly. You think there's more under the sugar? No. Then what? Under the bed. The widow's head snapped toward her room. What? The girl didn't smile. She says he left something. The night he was taken, the widow stood. I walked slowly. The girl followed. In the bedroom, the rocker creaked behind them. The widow knelt beside the cot, lifted the sheet, reached underneath. She pulled out a box, wooden, smooth, latched. She opened it. Inside, a toy truck, wooden wheels, one snapped, a photo, her, Caleb, younger, arms around each other, a corner torn, a drawing, crayon, a house, a tree, a son with no face, and a word, Mika, written in a child's hand. The widow dropped to the floor, shoulders shaking. I didn't know. The girl knelt beside her, touched the page. You remembered. That's why it stayed. The girl sat at the table, pencil in hand, eyes fixed on the blank page. The widow stood at the stove, waiting for the kettle to boil, though she hadn't lit the flame. Scratch, pause, scratch. Are you drawing something? The girl didn't answer. The widow turned. I watched her hand move in slow lines, arcs, a tilt of the wrist, like muscle memory had taken over. The page filled itself. Who is it? The girl tilted the paper toward her. Her. The widow stepped closer. The figure was tall, thin, a long pale dress, a nurse's cap, but the face, there wasn't one, just blank. No eyes, no mouth, no nose, just skin. She looked like that. The girl nodded. She always did. That's not a person. That's a ghost. She had a clipboard, took notes, smiled without smiling. That's nonsense. She wore perfume that made you sleep. The widow picked up the paper, stared at it hard. You're saying this is who ran that place. She didn't run it. She chose. Choose what? Who got to sleep? The widow sat down slowly. You mean killed? No. Just disappeared. The kettle started whining. Still cold. I remember a woman. The widow said. From the flood. Nurse. White dress. Took names. Said she was helping identify the bodies. The girl didn't move. She walked down the riverbank, clipboard in hand, tapped each child's forehead, said, We'll mark the calm ones first. The pencil paused. She marked Caleb. He was quiet even then. Wouldn't scream, wouldn't cry. What happened to her? No one saw her leave. The widow leaned back in her chair. I thought she drowned. She doesn't drown. What is she then? The girl set the pencil down. A collector. The widow stared at the paper. The lines of the dress were too neat. The shoes are perfectly small, like someone had drawn her before. Does she ever speak to you? Once. What did she say? She said, Be still. Your name's not yours yet. The widow whispered, She's still alive? The girl shrugged. She's still something. The widow pushed the drawing back. I want to burn this. She won't let you. She ain't in charge of me. She is, if you remember her. The kettle gave a second, longer whistle. The widow ignored it. She had long fingers, the girl said. Touched your shoulder like she owned it. We used to hear her heels on the tile. Tap, tap, tap. The widow flinched. She never ran, always glided. She sounds like a story. Something meant to scare children. She is. The widow stood, poured cold water into her mug anyway. She tapped Caleb too. The girl nodded, said he was her favorite. Why? He never looked away. The widow's eyes burned. And she took him? She doesn't take. She makes others carry. The widow gripped the edge of the sink. She told me once I'd be next. Said I had the kind of silence she liked. Said I wouldn't last a week. But you did. I bit her hand. The widow turned. You did what? She bled. The first time anyone saw her bleeding, the girl picked up the pencil again. She told me I'd forget the name she screamed, but I didn't. What name? Micah. The pencil snapped in her hand. The widow sat down. That's not possible. She whispered, said she had to keep him quiet, said if anyone remembered he'd come back. The widow whispered, come back how? The girl looked up. Not like you want. The wind hit the house hard then. The rocker creaked once, twice. The widow turned toward the sound. She's here? No. But the memory is, have you ever seen her outside the clinic? No. But she sees us. How? She waits in reflections. Corners. She lingers. The widow touched the drawing again. Why no face? She takes the faces of the ones she silences. The widow's breath caught. That's why it's blank. She hasn't taken yours yet. The widow stood. I walked to the hearth. Threw the drawing into the flames. It curled, blackened, vanished. The girl didn't react. The kettle still hissed cold. She's not gone, the girl said. I know. She'll be at the clinic. Then we go at dusk. She'll expect that. I hope so. The girl stood. I want to hear her heels. The widow said. Want to look her in the eye. She doesn't have eyes. I'll find them. The girl watched her. Quiet. The widow reached for the rifle, checked the chamber. You think that'll stop her? No. The widow said. But it'll stop the ones who protect her. She has friends? She has believers. This town kept her hidden, paid her, let her sort the children. Why? Because grief's easier than guilt. The girl whispered. She used to sing. I remember that. The girl's voice dropped lower. Rockabye, hush a lamb, gates are wide, time to stand. The widow froze. She sang that to Caleb. She sang it to all of us. The window pane rattled once. The girl looked at it. The widow didn't move. She'll come again tonight, the girl said. I hope she does. She'll try to take your name. She already did. The girl looked down. The widow picked up the broken pencil, pocketed it. We're not finished. No, ma'am. The rocker creaked again. Slow, steady. Neither of them turned. The old station sat sunken behind the post office, forgotten behind a rusted fence and brush that grew too thick to walk through without cutting. The widow didn't care. She pushed through it with her sleeves pulled down and her jaw clenched tight. The girl followed, silent, holding the lantern low. Neither spoke. The key was long gone. The door was swollen from rain and years of disuse. The widow kicked it in. The lock split with a groan. The smell hit hard. Mildew, paper rot, dust that had settled into the bones of the place. Don't touch anything yet, the widow said. I won't. She moved toward the back, the desk where her husband used to sit. She didn't look at the chair. I didn't need to. The drawers were locked. She reached behind the cabinet, pried loose the bottom panel with the claw end of a broken hammer. Inside, a box. Wood. No label, just a leather strap keeping it shut. She placed it on the desk, unlatched it. Ledgers, 4 of them. She flipped the first open. Dust rolled up in waves. Every page was handwritten. The columns are tight and neat. Names, numbers, codes. She skimmed until her finger stopped. Caleb, she breathed. The girl leaned in. Let me see. Here, his name. Full. Age 12. Circled. Beside it, status. Processed. A red line slashed through the rest. The widow's hand trembled. What does that mean? They marked the ones they moved. Where? The girl pointed to the margin, a code, R-5, O/H. Orchard/holding, she said. The widow's breath hitched. She flipped another page. Slower now. Another name. Another slash. Some were crossed out. Some just faded. Then her eyes stopped again. Line 43. Girl number 3. No real name. No birth year. Just unclaimed. Then escaped. That's me, the girl said softly. The widow looked at her. They never called me by name. Just a number. The widow turned the page. Another list. A 5. B2. M0. No context. No clue what it meant. Then a note at the bottom, scribbled in a rougher hand. Move silent cases to clinic gate. Prep sugar dosing. Authorization RN no sig RN, the widow whispered. Registered nurse. No, that's what she called herself. The widow flipped the next ledger open. Same handwriting, but shakier. Your husband wrote these? Yes. The girl pointed. His initials. WT, the widow nodded. William Tanner's. She reached for the final book. Older, edges curled. It cracked when she opened it. These weren't ledgers. They were letters. Hand-copied, no stamps. She scanned a page. Per request, Caleb Tanner's reassignment. Authorization granted. Parent consent form signed as C envelope 17A. The widow backed away. No, I never... The girl pulled the book closer. He forged it. What? He signed for you. The same day you collapsed in the kitchen. The widow gripped the desk. I remember that day. He told them you wouldn't wake for hours. Said it was safe. The girl flipped a few more pages. Stopped. Look. A drawing. Child's. A blue chair. Tilted. The girl's hand shook. They made me redraw it until it was wrong. Why? Because she said if it looked like home, I'd try to go back. The widow sat down. He knew all of this. The girl said he kept track. Then he buried it. The wind hit the station hard. The door swung wider on its broken hinge. The widow stood, grabbed the ledgers. We take these. They'll come for them. I hope they do. She wrapped the books in her coat. I turned to the girl. You still remember your number? 3. You want a name now? The girl looked at her. Are you offering one? Yes. The girl hesitated. Then say it, the widow said. Out loud. You choose. The girl thought for a long moment. Then, Marla. The widow smiled, tight. That's a good name. The girl, Marla, looked down at the ledger again. Cross it out, she whispered. I want to see it gone. The widow took the pen from the drawer, drew a black line through girl number 3. Then she wrote beneath it, Marla. Alive. Not for sale. The station creaked around them. The building is old, brittle, but still standing. She'd hide these, the girl said. The nurse. Not anymore. The widow lit the edge of a ripped page. Watch it catch. Curl. She let it burn in a tin pan under the desk. Marla said, You think he tried to fix it? The widow nodded once. Too late. But he tried. The girl held the final ledger tight. Then let's finish what he started. And together they stepped out of the station into the night that still remembered every name. The clinic door groaned open like something waking up wrong. The widow stepped inside first, lantern high, rifle slung over her shoulder, boots careful on the tile that had cracked into webs. Dust caught in the beam of light like ash, thick in the air, untouched by time but heavy with it. Marla followed close, eyes scanning everything, not with curiosity but with memory. They cleaned too much, she whispered. That's how you know it wasn't a hospital. The widow moved forward, slow. The front hall was still. The reception desk stripped, bare, chair toppled behind it. Folders scattered, some open, some clawed through. A blood pressure cuff hung limp from the wall like a noose. They leave the doors open after, Marla said, so the air can pretend it never happened. The widow didn't answer. She kept walking, down the main corridor, past a rusted wheelchair, past doors marked with faded stencils. Exam 3, Intake A, holding room. Back ward, Marla said. They didn't call it that, but it's what it was. The hallway narrowed. Paint peeled from the walls in long curls. Somewhere, water dripped behind the plaster, soft and constant. At the end stood a single steel door. No handle, just a dent where one used to be. The widow raised her boot and kicked hard. The door creaked open. The air inside was warmer. She stepped in, then stopped. A long, low room stretched ahead. 20 cots lined the walls, 10 each side. All but one were made up tight, corners folded sharp, quilts flat. Only the third on the left had been disturbed. Sheets wrinkled, quilt turned down, pillow still pressed. The widow walked toward it like the rest of the room might vanish if she moved too fast. The lantern's beam bounced from bed frame to bed frame. Every other mattress sat untouched. He was here, Marla whispered. The widow dropped to her knees beside the unmade cot, reached forward, laid her hand on the pillow. It was still warm. She blinked. This doesn't make sense. Marla crouched next to her. They kept it ready. Just in case. In case of what? In case someone remembered. The widow pulled back the sheet, fingers trembling. There, tucked beneath the pillow, a wooden toy, a rabbit, carved by hand, one ear chipped, the other too long. Simple, familiar. She turned it over. etched into the bottom, M.T. The widow gasped. He made this. Caleb carved this. That's my mark. He left it, Marla said. For you. The widow stared at it like it might move. He was always carving something. Said it helped him think. Said I had to sign each one if I wanted to keep them. She held it tighter. He was here, she whispered again. Yes. She looked up. Why would they let him keep it? They didn't. He hid it. Or she let him. The widow turned her eyes across the room. You mean the nurse? Marla nodded. The widow stood slowly, eyes scanning each cot. Who were they? The ones who didn't fight. The ones she picked. The widow stepped to the next bed. Then the next. All made, all cold. She watched us from the ceiling, Marla said. Through the vents. If you stirred at night, she sang. The widow's fingers brushed across another pillow. Flat, crisp, empty. She whispered, this wasn't meant to heal anyone. No, it was meant to hold. The widow circled back to the third cot. Sat down on it. Felt the mattress groan under her. Why is it still warm? Some places don't let go, Marla said. The widow turned the rabbit over in her hand. He was scared of the dark. I know. Used to crawl into my bed when he was 5. Said the moon had teeth. He didn't sleep here. No. He waited. The widow set the rabbit on her lap. For me? For anyone. She reached beneath the bed again. Her fingers touched paper. She pulled out a folded note. No envelope. Child's handwriting. I saw her again. She has your face. I said your name. She blinked. The widow's hands shook. Marla, she said. Yes. I think she wore my face. She does that. When they almost forget you, the widow stood. I walked slowly to the wall, ran her fingers along the chipped paint. I need to know what's below this place. You won't like it. I haven't liked any of it. Marla moved to the corner, pulled back a mat, revealed a metal plate bolted into the tile. She told me to run before they open this one, she said. The widow knelt beside it. We open it now. No key. We won't use one. She slammed the butt of her rifle against the bolt. Again. And again. On the third try, it cracked. The plate loosened. She pulled it free. A hole. No ladder. Just a square shaft, maybe 5 feet down. Earth below, cut into stone. Looks like a tunnel. It is. Where does it lead? Marla looked away. To the names they didn't cross out. The widow folded the paper, slid it into her coat, picked up the rabbit again. We're going down tonight. Marla nodded. If we don't come back, we're not coming back, the widow said. Not until I find the bed that never cooled, the one they left him in. The lantern flickered, and in the silence that followed, the cot behind them creaked once, as if someone had just rolled over. They found the records in a locked drawer beneath the intake counter, hidden behind a false back. Marla spotted the catch first, a gap too clean for rot, too deliberate for accident. The widow pried it open with the edge of her rifle barrel. The drawer came loose with a soft, resistant pop. Inside, folders, labeled by year, not name. The labels were handwritten, then scratched out, scribbled over, relabeled in red ink. Pick one, the widow said. Marla reached for the one marked post-discharge, 5 years. She opened it slowly, pages crisp despite the dust, typed forms, scanned charts. A thin paperclip rusted through. Then she froze. What is it? The widow asked. Marla flipped to the last page. This. She handed it over. The widow took it. At the top, transfer authorization, minor ward release, non-parental consent. Date, 7 months ago. Signed, William Tanners. The widow stared. No, she said. No, no. Marla said nothing. The widow ran her thumb over the signature. Her husband's name, neat, slanted. The loop in the T just like he used to do. But too smooth, too careful. He's been dead for over a year, she whispered. Marla nodded. They're still using him. No, this is a mistake. They forged it. The widow backed away, holding the paper like it might catch fire. This isn't real. He gave them Caleb, Marla said. No, maybe not now. But once the widow shook her head. You don't know that. They let her in because he asked them to. He wouldn't. He did. The widow turned fast, voice sharp. Don't you say that? Marla lowered her eyes. The widow looked back at the paper. This form released someone, a child. But to whom? She flipped the page. There it was, a second name, redacted, blotted out, but beneath it, a title, RN 4139, Gate A. Her mouth dried. That's her, isn't it? Yes. This was approved, official, legal. They make everything look right. She sat down hard on the broken chair behind the counter. He kept saying he was paying off Caleb's memory, that he had debts, things he needed to fix. Marla crouched beside her. He made a deal. He said he had insurance paperwork. That was all. Marla looked at the form. This isn't insurance. He told me to stop asking. And you did. I didn't know what I was signing away. She pressed the form flat against her lap, staring at it. Why his signature, she whispered. Why not forget someone else? Because his name opened doors. The widow's jaw clenched. I gave this town 30 years. Church boards, meal trains. I stayed after they buried him in a box without a body. You stayed because you thought silence meant loyalty. The widow's eyes burned. They told me the clinic closed for lack of funding. That the flood destroyed records. That the children lost were displaced. Marla shook her head. They weren't displaced. They were processed. The widow stood again, form still in hand. I want to see his old office. At home. You think there are more papers? No. I want to see what he left behind. Marla hesitated. You think he knew what they'd do? The widow didn't answer, just walked toward the exit. They passed through the hallway again. The vents above them no longer hummed. They heard their own footsteps echo now. No whispers, no creaks, not even the chair. When they stepped out into the cold air, the wind hit like a warning. The widow turned. I let him convince me grief should be neat. Marla said, It never is. They walked back to the house without speaking. Inside, the widow moved straight to the study, pulled down the tin box from the top shelf. She hadn't opened it in over a year. She sat on the floor, flipped the latch. Photos, receipts, a folded American flag, his badge, his last pay stub, and under that, notebook. She opened it. Nothing on the first page, or the second. Then, a list. Children, status notes, no names, just numbers and dates. A checkmark next to each. A 1, compliant B4, removed C7, sleep, unconfirmed, and down the list, MT, returned. The widow stared. Micah, Marla leaned in. What does that mean? He brought him back. When? No date. Where? The widow stood. I walked to the pantry, opened the floor hatch. A storm cellar, dry, empty, forgotten. But in the back, a folded blanket, blue, child-sized. She pulled it out. Inside, a letter, addressed to her. No stamp, no name. She opened it. I gave him back. I owed you that. I couldn't face what I signed. I thought it would buy him more time. I was wrong. I tried to pull him. They said he spoke your name in the dark, over and over. That's how I found him. I'm sorry it wasn't dated, just signed with one line. WT. The widow's knees hit the ground. Marla caught her elbow. You okay? No. She pressed the letter to her chest. He tried, she said. Yes. He failed. Yes. She looked at the blue blanket. It still smelled like smoke and cedar. I forgive him, Marla said. You don't have to. I do. The rocker creaked from the other room. The widow whispered, He's listening. Marla whispered back, Then say it again. The widow held the letter tight and said it louder. I forgive you. The wind outside stilled. The chair did not. She dug until her hands bled. Not in the orchard, not where the badge was found or the shirt with moon buttons, but behind the house, beneath the willow stump where grass never took, where the dog used to bark before it disappeared, where her husband once said, Let it be wild. Marla stood a few feet back, silent, holding the lantern. The light cast long shadows that stretched like fingers across the dirt. The moon offered no help. The shovel struck root, then stone, then something softer. The widow dropped to her knees. She didn't cry, didn't speak. Her fingers clawed past damp earth, grit biting under her nails. Then she found some clothes, pale, torn, familiar. She pulled it gently, and the soil caved with it. Small bones shifted free of the dirt. A tiny ribcage, warped. A jawbone, smooth and round. Fragments of something once living, too small for time. Her breath hitched. This wasn't an animal. Marla stepped closer. No, ma'am. The widow's hand brushed the sternum. Something metal clinked against her palm. A chain. She pulled. A child's locket, dull silver, still shut. Her hands shook as she opened it. Inside, 2 faces, one she knew, one she didn't. Caleb, laughing, the dimple in his chin. Beside him, another boy. Same eyes, smaller frame, same grin, just dimmer. "Micah," she breathed. Marla knelt beside her. "You remembered. I didn't." "You did." Just not all at once. The widow gripped the locket tighter. "They told me I was wrong. That there was only Caleb. That the other was a fever dream. Something I lost too early to matter. You didn't lose him. He was taken." Marla nodded. "Before you named him out loud, before he cried twice," the widow's voice cracked. "They told me it was stillbirth. They gave you drugs. Put silence in your head. Tell your husband it was mercy. He signed. He believed them." She looked down at the bones. "And when did they put him here?" "The day you forgot." The wind picked up behind them, moving the willow branches like arms. The house stood quiet. The rocker inside creaked once, then fell still. The widow sat back. "This is why I could never sleep right." Marla didn't speak. She lifted the locket again. "He kept this. Caleb kept this. He remembered his brother." The widow's voice shook. "He tried to show me once. Drew 2 stick figures. I told him not to lie. You weren't lying. You were surviving." She lowered the locket back into the grave. "What do I do now?" Marla took her hand. "You name him." The widow stared at the earth. "Micah Tanners." The name sounded strange in the open air. Real. Heavier than grief. She picked up the bones piece by piece, set them gently on the cloth, folded them into the shape of a boy only she could picture. "Why here?" she whispered. "Because you'd find him." The widow wiped her face. Her tears didn't fall. They just stayed there, glowing in the lantern light. She pulled the shovel close. "Help me dig deeper." They worked in silence, dirt falling in cold clumps around their boots. When the hole was wide enough, she lowered the bundle in. Then she sat. She stared at it, then at the willow, then at the house. The back window was lit, though she'd left no lamp burning. "She's watching," Marla said. "I know." "What now?" "We bury him." She reached for the shovel, but Marla stopped her. "Wait." Marla leaned down, took something from her pocket. A single scrap of cloth, blue, faded embroidery. She tucked it into the grave. "What's that?" "The edge of the blanket he was wrapped in." Before they gave him to her, the widow blinked. "You carried that all this time." "I kept it in my shoe. When I ran," the widow gripped the handle. "You shouldn't have had to." "I know." She poured the earth back slowly. When the grave was full, she stood. "We need a marker. No names." Marla said, "Not yet." "Why?" "So they don't come looking." The widow nodded. Found an old iron horseshoe beside the barn, drove it into the earth, bent low, pressed her hand flat to the soil. "I see you now," she whispered. Marla took her hand. "You remembered. That's how we wake." The wind shifted again. The grass behind the house rustled once, then calmed. The willow stood straighter. The light in the window faded. The widow turned. "Tomorrow we go back." "To the tunnels?" "To the place where no names were spoken." Marla squeezed her fingers. "And if she's still down there." The widow didn't hesitate. "Then we remind her who she forgot." Behind them, the rocker creaked once more. Not like it used to. This time, it sounded like someone standing up.